stared at the document, threatening to destroy her dream of restoring the old Harrington estate she'd purchased at a county auction just 3 months earlier. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But 7 weeks later, at a packed town council meeting, Mitchell's confident smile vanished as Professor Thomas Winters stepped forward. Our authentication confirms that the documents Ms. Chen discovered in the concealed room beneath the Harrington estate contain the original journals and correspondence of Dr. Rebecca Harrington, whose groundbreaking medical research saved thousands during the 1918 influenza pandemic and whose contributions have been systematically erased from medical history. Meridian Creek had once been known for its stately family homes surrounding the town square, an idyllic postcard of Midwestern charm nestled between rolling hills and fertile farmland. The Harrington estate, with its distinctive red brick facade and wraparound veranda, had stood for over a century on the eastern edge of town, a reminder of the community's prosperous past. In recent decades, as young people migrated to larger cities for opportunities, many historic homes had fallen into disrepair. Properties once valued for their craftsmanship suddenly became burdens, too expensive to maintain, but too historically significant to demolish. The town council had struggled for years to balance preservation with practical development. Olivia Chen, 36, had never intended to become a homeowner in Meridian Creek. A research librarian and single mother of twins, Jackson and Lily, she had been searching for an affordable home outside the city where her 10-year-old children could have space to grow. When the abandoned Harrington estate appeared at a county auction for unpaid property taxes, she saw an opportunity that seemed almost too good to be true. "It needs substantial work," she admitted to her concerned parents over a video call, panning her phone camera across the peeling wallpaper and sagging porch. "But the foundation is solid, and there's something about this place that feels right, like it's been waiting for someone." The Grand Victorian had stood empty for nearly 7 years after the last distant Harrington relative passed away without heirs, leaving years of unpaid taxes that forced the property into public auction. The once elegant 15-acre estate had become an overgrown tangle surrounding an aging structure that most potential buyers considered a money pit. What Olivia saw was possibility. High ceilings, intricate woodwork beneath layers of paint, original hardwood floors under worn carpeting, and enough bedrooms for each child to have their own space, plus a home office for her remote work. The county had valued the property at $325,000, but years of back taxes and the extensive renovation needs had pushed the minimum bid down to $175,000. When auction day came, Olivia was surprised to find only 2 other bidders, a developer who seemed only mildly interested and an elderly gentleman who dropped out after the first round. With hands that could barely hold the bidding paddle steady, she signed the papers and became the owner of the Harrington estate for $182,000, nearly all her savings and the inheritance her grandmother had left specifically for putting down roots. "You actually bought that old place?" her friend Diana asked in disbelief when Olivia called with the news. "It's been abandoned forever. What about the stories?" "What stories?" Olivia asked, her excitement momentarily dampened. "Just local gossip, that the last Harrington was eccentric, that the house has secrets. You know, the usual small-town talk about old houses." Olivia dismissed the comments as typical rumor mill fodder. Her focus was on making the essential repairs before moving her family from their cramped city apartment. Between her librarians, salary and the remainder of her inheritance, she had just enough for critical renovations, a new roof, updated electrical systems, and functional plumbing. What Olivia couldn't know was that her purchase had disrupted carefully orchestrated plans. Heritage Village Development Corporation, headed by James Mitchell, had been systematically acquiring properties around the historic district for a planned, authentic living history experience, a sanitized tourist attraction that would generate substantial revenue for the town while showcasing a carefully curated version of local history. The Harrington estate occupied a pivotal location that would provide the perfect entrance to the proposed development. Mitchell had assumed the dilapidated mansion would eventually fall into his company's hands when no serious bidders appeared. At auction, Olivia's unexpected purchase had thrown a wrench into his meticulously planned timeline. 4 weeks after purchasing the property, Olivia and the twins had settled into a renovation routine. While contractors handled structural necessities, Olivia spent evenings stripping decades of wallpaper and weekends carefully restoring original woodwork. The twins had claimed the sprawling grounds as their territory, mapping forgotten garden paths and discovering the remnants of what had once been an impressive orchard. It was during one of these explorations that Jackson made a discovery that would lead to something far more significant. "Mom, look what I found," he called, racing into the kitchen, where Olivia was cataloging original hardware removed from cabinets. Jackson held out a tarnished silver locket on a delicate chain. "Where did you find this?" Olivia asked, carefully taking the antique piece. "Under the big oak tree near the stone wall. It was half buried in the dirt, like it had been there forever." Olivia examined the locket, noting its intricate engraving and unmistakable age. When opened, it contained a tiny sepia photograph of a serious-looking woman in Victorian dress and a small scrap of paper with the initials R.H. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. R.H. could be a Harrington, Olivia mused. This looks very old and might have historical significance. That evening, Olivia showed the locket to Eleanor Winters, an 82-year-old neighbor who had lived adjacent to the Harrington estate her entire life. The elderly woman's hands trembled as she examined it. "That's Rebecca's," she whispered, looking up with sudden intensity. Rebecca Harrington. She was the daughter of the original owner, born in the 1880s. "Where exactly did you find this?" When Olivia explained, Eleanor grew strangely quiet. "The Harringtons were private people with complicated histories," she finally said. "Rebecca was educated at a time when women rarely attended university. She studied medicine in Europe and returned during the Great Influenza outbreak. Some say she developed treatments that saved many lives, but her work was never officially recognized." The conversation left Olivia curious, but focused on more immediate concerns, like the basement that needed waterproofing before the fall rains. The following Saturday, she descended the narrow stairs into the damp space beneath the kitchen, armed with cleaning supplies and determination. The basement was larger than expected, with stone walls and ancient shelving. Decades of neglect had left it filled with discarded furniture and water-damaged boxes. As Olivia cleared the far corner, she noticed something unusual about the stone wall, a slight variation in the mortar color, forming a rectangular pattern. "That's odd," she murmured, running her fingers along the edge where the mortar changed a color. As she applied pressure, she felt a slight give. Heart quickening, she pressed harder and felt a distinct shift. "Lily! Jackson!" she called. "Bring me the flashlight from my tool bag." With the twins watching wide-eyed from the stairs, Olivia examined the wall more carefully. What had appeared to be solid stone was actually a concealed door, its edges disguised by expert masonry, but betrayed by the slightly different colored mortar. "It's a secret room," Lily whispered, echoing every child's fantasy of hidden passages. With trembling hands, Olivia pressed against the section. At first, Nothing happened, but as she applied steady pressure and pushed to the right, the stone door grudgingly moved, revealing darkness beyond. The flashlight beam cut through decades of undisturbed darkness, illuminating a small room lined with shelves. This space had been deliberately sealed and hidden from casual discovery. As the light swept across the chamber, Olivia gasped. The room contained a small desk, bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, and most remarkably, medical equipment from the early 20th century. Glass vials, instruments, and what appeared to be a primitive microscope. Every surface was covered with dust, undisturbed for generations. "What is it, Mom?" Lily asked, peering anxiously from the doorway. "I'm not sure," Olivia replied honestly, "but I think we just found something very important." She carefully approached the desk, where several leather-bound books lay open, as if the occupant had stepped away only momentarily. The pages were covered in neat handwriting, the ink faded to brown. The date at the top of one page read, October 12th, 1918. The wall hung a framed document, yellowed and brittle. It appeared to be a rejection letter from a medical journal, stating that treatments proposed by individuals without proper medical standing cannot be considered for publication regardless of anecdotal evidence of efficacy. Olivia's librarian training immediately kicked in. This wasn't just an interesting find, it was potentially significant historical evidence that required proper handling and documentation. As she ushered the twins back upstairs, promising to investigate with expert help, Olivia couldn't know that the hidden chamber would not only unravel the secret history of the Harrington estate, but would ultimately become their salvation when forces beyond their control threatened their new home. That evening, Olivia sat at her kitchen table, the silver locket with RH before her, connecting pieces of a puzzle. The Harrington estate had harbored secrets that someone had gone to great lengths to conceal, and now those secrets had been entrusted to her. The morning after finding the hidden chamber, Olivia woke before dawn, her mind racing with questions about what lay beneath her new home. Instead of continuing the planned living room renovation, she found herself drawn back to the basement. Standing in the hidden room, as early light filtered through the narrow ground-level window, she studied the space with growing amazement, not just as an unusual discovery, but as a deliberate creation that someone had painstakingly concealed. The medical equipment dominated the small space, glass vials in wooden racks, instruments of brass and steel, and notebooks filled with meticulous observations. As a research librarian with a background in history, she understood enough to recognize potential historical significance, but not enough to fully assess what she'd found. This wasn't just hidden, she murmured to herself, running her hand along the dust-covered desk. It was preserved. Olivia examined the room more carefully in the daylight. The stone walls had been expertly fitted to prevent moisture damage. The bookshelves contained not only journals, but what appeared to be research papers and correspondence, each carefully organized by date from 1916 to 1922. As she moved through the space, disturbing decades of settled dust, she was struck by the deliberate nature of the concealment. Whoever had sealed this room had intended it to be found eventually, but only by someone who would appreciate its significance. Later that morning, Olivia called the one person she thought might help make sense of her discovery. Dr. Thomas Winters had been her mentor during her master's program, and now served as the history department chair at the State University. At 64, he was a recognized expert on early 20th century medical history, with particular focus on the 1918 influenza pandemic. A hidden medical laboratory from the pandemic era, Dr. Winters said, his voice rising with interest when Olivia explained her discovery. "And you say this was on the old Harrington property? That's potentially very significant." The rejection letter mentioned treatments that weren't considered for publication. Olivia added. "Does that suggest anything to you?" The line went silent for a moment. "Are you absolutely certain that's what it said?" Dr. Winters finally asked, his tone deadly serious. "Yes, I have a photo of the letter on my phone. I can send it to you. Please do immediately. And Olivia, don't mention this discovery to anyone else yet. If this is what I think it might be, you've stumbled onto something of extraordinary historical importance." Within minutes of receiving Olivia's photo, Dr. Winters called back. "I'm rearranging my schedule and bringing my colleague Dr. Maya. Patel, we can be there tomorrow morning. This chamber needs to be properly documented before anything is disturbed. It's that significant." During the 1918 pandemic, the medical establishment was overwhelmed and often ineffective, Dr. Winters explained. There were reports of a female physician in the Midwest who developed alternative treatments using herbal compounds that showed remarkable efficacy, particularly in reducing mortality rates among children. Her methods were dismissed by the medical establishment of the time, and her identity has remained a mystery to medical historians. "And you think this might be connected to her work?" Olivia asked, glancing toward the basement door. "There have been references in private correspondence to a Dr. R, whose homeopathic approaches saved many lives when traditional medical interventions failed. If your discovery contains documentation of these treatments and their outcomes, it could fundamentally change our understanding of pandemic response during that critical period." The following morning, Dr. Winters arrived with Dr. Patel, a medical historian specializing in women in medicine. As Olivia led them to the hidden chamber, she explained how Jackson had discovered the locket first, which had indirectly led to finding the secret room. The initials R.H. Rebecca Harrington, Dr. Patel noted as she examined the locket Olivia had placed on the kitchen table. The timing would align perfectly. She would have been in her 30s during the pandemic. In the hidden chamber, both historians moved with careful reverence, documenting everything with photographs before touching any artifacts. Dr. Winters examined the medical equipment while Dr. Patel carefully studied the journals. "This is remarkable," Dr. Patel breathed, gently turning pages with a gloved hand. "These aren't just research notes. These are detailed case studies documenting treatments and outcomes." Rebecca was systematically tracking the efficacy of her methods against the standard treatments of the time. "The equipment is consistent with what would have been available to a well-trained physician of the era," Dr. Winters confirmed. "And look at this. Formulations for compounds using traditional herbal remedies integrated with emerging medical understanding of the period. It's an extraordinary bridge between traditional and modern approaches." For hours, they carefully examined and catalogued the chamber's contents, their initial excitement giving way to deep professional focus. Olivia assisted, following their instructions for proper handling and documentation. "What's truly remarkable is how comprehensive her documentation was," Dr. Patel explained. "She wasn't just practicing medicine, she was conducting rigorous research under extraordinary circumstances. The statistical analysis of her outcomes compared to regional hospitals shows she understood scientific methodology far ahead of many of her contemporaries." As they worked, Dr. Winters shared what was known about the 1918 pandemic and how it had devastated communities across America. The official medical response had often proven inadequate, creating space for alternative approaches that sometimes yielded better results but were frequently dismissed by the establishment. Medical gatekeeping was particularly rigid when it came to female practitioners, he explained. A woman physician developing more effective treatments than her male colleagues would have faced tremendous obstacles to recognition, regardless of her results. "But it was Rebecca Harrington all along," Olivia mused, carefully examining a portrait they'd found among the journals, clearly the same serious young woman from the locket photograph. It appears so, Dr. Patel agreed, and from these journals, we can see she was systematically documenting everything, perhaps hoping that someday her work would be properly evaluated on its merits, rather than dismissed because of her gender. By mid-afternoon, they had documented the most significant artifacts and developed a preliminary preservation plan. Dr. Winters made several calls to colleagues at the State Historical Society, arranging for conservation experts to properly assess the materials. Olivia, I cannot overstate the historical significance of what you've discovered, Dr. Winters said, as they sat at her kitchen table reviewing their findings. This is a major historical discovery that will reshape our understanding of pandemic response strategies and highlight the overlooked contributions of women physicians during this critical period. What happens next? Olivia asked, still processing the magnitude of her discovery. With your permission, we'd like to bring in a professional conservation team to properly preserve these materials, Dr. Patel explained. The journals, the medical equipment, and particularly the documented case studies. These are irreplaceable historical treasures. Of course, Olivia agreed readily, but they'd remain here, right? On the property where they were created? The historians exchanged glances. Ideally, yes, Dr. Winters said carefully. The historical context of the location adds significant value. A preserved site with original artifacts in their original location would be the best outcome from a historical perspective. But, Olivia prompted, sensing his hesitation, but proper preservation requires controlled environmental conditions. Security and ongoing maintenance, Dr. Patel explained. That would require significant funding and infrastructure that's typically beyond what a private homeowner can provide. Olivia nodded slowly, understanding the implications. Her discovery was too significant to remain simply a private curiosity. In her basement, it belonged in some sense to history itself. There might be grants available for historical preservation, Dr. Winters suggested, seeing Olivia's expression. The site could potentially qualify for designation on the National Register of Historic Places, which would open up preservation funding options. As they continued discussing possibilities, Olivia's phone chimed with a text message from the contractor she'd hired for the kitchen renovation. County says permits on hold due to zoning review. All work stopped until resolved. Call ASAP. Olivia frowned at the message. She'd carefully filed all the necessary paperwork weeks ago, and the initial permits had already been approved. This sudden issue seemed suspiciously timed. What she couldn't know was that news of unusual activity at the Harrington estate, specifically the arrival of recognized historians, had already reached James Mitchell. The developer had immediately activated his connections at the county offices to gather information and potentially create obstacles. As Olivia called the contractor to get details, Dr. Patel continued examining the portrait of Rebecca Harrington. There's something remarkable about her expression, she mused, the determination in her eyes. She knew the value of her work, even when others dismissed it. While Olivia dealt with the permit issue, Dr. Winters turned his attention to a wooden box containing correspondence. Opening the earliest envelope from 1916, he found a letter written in elegant script describing Rebecca's decision to return from Europe as war tensions escalated. My training at Vienna Medical University has given me perspectives that few American physicians possess, Rebecca had written to an unnamed colleague. While the medical establishment here may never fully accept my methods or credentials, I cannot in good conscience withhold treatments that might save lives simply because tradition dictates that women should not practice medicine independently. She knew exactly what she was facing, Dr. Winters murmured, yet she persisted anyway. According to my neighbor Eleanor, the Harrington line faded out when the last owner died without heirs, Olivia said, rejoining them after finishing her call. That's why the property went to auction. Perhaps without direct descendants, Dr. Patel suggested, but there might be relatives through other lines, perhaps female relatives whose surnames changed through marriage. As the historians prepared to leave with their preliminary documentation, arranging to return with the conservation team in 2 days, Olivia walked them to their car. The uneasy feeling about the suddenly revoked permits had grown stronger, particularly when the contractor mentioned that the official he'd spoken with had asked specifically about any historical features on the property. "One last thing," Dr. Winters said before departing. "If anyone from the county or any developers contact you about the property, please let me know immediately. Historical finds like this can become complicated when development interests are involved." "You think someone might try to interfere with the preservation?" Olivia asked. "It wouldn't be the first time," Dr. Patel replied grimly. "Historical preservation and development often find themselves at odds, especially when valuable land is involved." As their car disappeared down the long driveway, Olivia turned back toward the house, her mind swirling with the day's revelations. The humble home she'd purchased as a fresh start for her family had revealed itself to be something far more significant, a hidden chapter of medical history preserved for generations, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. What Olivia couldn't yet understand was that her discovery had set in motion forces beyond her control, forces that would soon place her and her children in direct conflict with powerful interests that viewed history as an inconvenient obstacle to profit. That evening, as the twins excitedly examined photographs of the artifacts under Olivia's careful supervision, they heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. Through the front window, Olivia recognized the county assessor's car pulling into her driveway, followed closely by a luxury sedan she'd never seen before. The battle for the Harrington estate and the historical treasure it contained was about to begin in earnest. "Ms. Chen, I'm Robert Wilson from the county assessor's office," announced the man in the pressed suit and tie. "And this is Mr. Mitchell. From Heritage Village Development, we need to discuss some irregularities with your property purchase." Olivia stood in her doorway, positioning herself to block their view into the house where Jackson and Lily were finishing dinner. "What kind of irregularities? My paperwork was all in order at the auction." "May we come in?" Mitchell asked with practiced politeness, already moving toward the door as if her consent was a foregone conclusion. "Actually, this isn't a good time," Olivia replied firmly. "I'd be happy to schedule a meeting at the county offices tomorrow." Mitchell's smile tightened. "This is somewhat urgent, Ms. Chen. It's come to our attention that there may have been procedural errors in the auction process that could affect your ownership status." Olivia's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure. "If there's a formal concern, please send it in writing to my attorney. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get my children ready for bed." As she closed the door, she caught Mitchell's calculating glance toward the direction of the basement entrance. Someone had clearly informed him about the historian's visit and their discovery. Inside, Olivia immediately called Dr. Winters, explaining the unexpected visit. "They're claiming there were procedural errors with the auction," she concluded. "This can't be a coincidence." "It's not," Dr. Winters confirmed grimly. "I've made some inquiries. Mitchell's company has been systematically acquiring properties throughout Meridian Creek for this Heritage Village project. The Harrington estate sits at a crucial location that would complete their planned development. But they can't just invalidate a legal purchase, can they?" "Not legitimately," Dr. Winters replied. "But they can create delays, bureaucratic obstacles, and pressure. From what I've learned, Mitchell has considerable influence with certain county officials." "What should I do?" "First, we need to accelerate the historical designation process. I've already contacted the State Historic Preservation Office with preliminary documentation. Dr. Patel has reached out to colleagues at the National Public Health Historical Association. After ending the call, Olivia checked her email to find a formal notice from the county claiming that documentation irregularities required a review of her property purchase. The notice mentioned a hearing scheduled in just 6 days, an unusually expedited timeline that further confirmed Mitchell's influence. The following morning, Olivia drove to the county courthouse, determined to understand exactly what irregularities were being claimed. At the records office, the clerk seemed unusually uncomfortable when Olivia requested the complete file related to the Harrington estate auction. "Those records are currently under administrative review," the clerk explained, nervously. "I can't access them until the process is complete." "When will that be?" "I couldn't say. The special review was ordered yesterday by Commissioner Blackwell." "Is it normal for property records to become suddenly unavailable right after a purchase?" Olivia pressed. The clerk glanced around before lowering her voice. "Between us? No, I've worked here 15 years and never seen it happen. But when requests come from the Commissioner's office..." She trailed off meaningfully. Olivia's next stop was the office of Maria Sanchez, a real estate attorney recommended by Dr. Winters. After reviewing the situation, Maria's assessment was blunt. "They're manufacturing a crisis to pressure you into selling," she explained. "The procedural errors claim is vague enough to create uncertainty, but difficult to disprove if they're restricting access to the records. So what can we do?" "Two things simultaneously," Maria advised. "First, we challenge their legal maneuvering with our own. I'll file a motion to dismiss their review for lack of specificity and demand immediate access to all relevant records. And second, we use the historical significance as leverage. If the property receives historical designation before they can invalidate your purchase, it becomes much more difficult for them to proceed with development plans." As they developed their strategy, Maria's assistant entered with breaking news. Heritage Village Development had just issued a press release announcing a major new attraction that prominently featured renderings showing the Harrington estate transformed into the grand entrance and historical medicine exhibit of their planned village. "They're creating momentum," Maria observed grimly, "making their development seem inevitable to increase pressure on you and potentially influence the county commissioners who'll hear your case." That afternoon, Olivia returned home to find Dr. Patel waiting with an elderly woman who introduced herself as Margaret Thompson, a retired nurse and local medical historian. "Dr. Patel contacted me about Rebecca Harrington," Margaret explained, as they sat on Olivia's porch. "I've been documenting local medical history for decades, and the rumors about a woman physician with remarkable success during the pandemic have persisted, but without concrete evidence until now." She handed Olivia a faded newspaper clipping from October 1918. The headline read, "Mysterious Drop in Child Mortality Puzzles Doctors," with a subheading noting that Eastern District reports fewer deaths despite highest infection rates. "The Eastern District was where the Harrington estate is located," Margaret explained. "Local folklore has long claimed that Rebecca was secretly treating patients here when hospitals were overwhelmed, but there was never any documentation." Dr. Patel nodded. "The journals confirm it. Rebecca was not just researching alternative treatments. She was actively treating patients, particularly children, with herbal compounds that appear to have reduced the cytokine storm response that made the 1918 flu so deadly." "A cytokine? What?" Olivia asked. "In simple terms, many pandemic victims didn't die directly from the virus, but from their own immune systems overreacting. Rebecca's treatments seem to have modulated that response, particularly in children. It was a revolutionary approach that wouldn't become mainstream medical understanding for decades. This revelation added another layer of historical significance to Olivia's discovery. As they continued discussing the medical implications, Lily burst from the house, eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, Jackson found something else!" she exclaimed. It was inside the old desk in the study when we were cleaning out the drawers. Olivia followed her daughter inside, where Jackson stood holding a small brass key with an unusual design on its head. "May I?" Dr. Patel asked, examining the key closely. "This symbol, it matches one engraved on some of the medical instruments in the hidden room." "Where exactly did you find this, Jackson?" The boy led them to the study, where a Victorian desk stood against the wall. It was taped under the bottom drawer. I only found it because I dropped my action figure and it rolled underneath. The key fit perfectly into a small, previously unnoticed keyhole on the back panel of the desk. With a well-preserved click despite the decades, a hidden compartment opened to reveal a leather-bound volume and a sealed envelope marked "For those who seek truth" in faded ink. Dr. Patel carefully opened the leather volume to reveal meticulous records of patients treated during the height of the pandemic, with detailed notes on treatments administered and outcomes observed. "This is extraordinary," she whispered. "A complete clinical record organized by treatment protocol." Rebecca was conducting what we would now recognize as a controlled study, comparing her methods against standard practices of the time. Olivia carefully opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a letter dated April 15, 1920. "To the finder of these records, if you are reading this, you have discovered the work I was forced to conceal during my lifetime. My research into alternative treatments for the influenza pandemic was dismissed without consideration by medical authorities, despite clear evidence of efficacy, because of my gender and my use of remedies deemed unscientific by established practice. I have chosen to preserve these records and my laboratory intact, hidden from those who would destroy them, in the hope that someday medicine will advance beyond such prejudices and my findings might be evaluated on their merits rather than rejected, based on who proposed them. The complete documentation of my work is contained in my journals and this clinical record. I entrust them to the future, when perhaps minds will be more open than those of my contemporaries. Rebecca Harrington, M.D. The letter continued with specific instructions about preserving her records and equipment, revealing that Rebecca had deliberately created the hidden chamber as a time capsule, hoping that future generations would understand and value her revolutionary approach. "This changes everything," Dr. Patel said, after they had documented the new discoveries. "With this letter and clinical record, along with the preserved laboratory and journals, the historical case becomes undeniable. This property represents a unique and irreplaceable piece of medical history." That evening, as Olivia updated Dr. Winters and Maria Sanchez about the new discoveries, the attorney's assessment was optimistic. "This strengthens our position significantly," Maria confirmed. "I'll immediately file for emergency historical designation. Based on these new findings, the pandemic connection with physical evidence and documentation should qualify for expedited consideration." Olivia felt a growing sense of purpose about her role as the unexpected guardian of Rebecca's legacy. What had begun as a simple search for an affordable home had evolved into something far more meaningful, a chance to preserve and share a brilliant woman's contributions to medicine that had been unjustly erased from history. The following morning brought another unexpected visitor. Eleanor Winters hobbled up the porch steps with the help of a cane, accompanied by a middle-aged woman Olivia had never met. "I should have told you everything from the beginning," Eleanor said as Olivia helped her into a chair. "When you found Rebecca's locket, I knew the time had come, but I wasn't sure if you were the right person." "The right person for what?" To protect Rebecca's legacy, Eleanor replied. There's something you need to know. The Harrington bloodline didn't end with the last owner, as most people believe. It continued through a different name, through my grandmother's line. This is my daughter, Catherine Morris, Eleanor continued, introducing her companion. She's a physician at Johns Hopkins, specializing in immunology. We are direct descendants of Rebecca Harrington. Then the letter was meant for your family, Olivia said, remembering Rebecca's words. Yes, Catherine. Confirmed. Family stories always said Rebecca left something important hidden in the house, but no one knew exactly what or where. We knew about her medical work during the pandemic, but had no proof of her methodologies. But why didn't your family bid? At the auction? Olivia asked. We tried, Catherine explained, but suddenly the auction date was changed with minimal notice. By the time we learned of the new date, it was too late for me to arrange travel from Baltimore. This new information added yet another dimension to the increasingly complex situation. As they discussed the family connection, Olivia's phone rang. Maria Sanchez was calling with urgent news. The county has moved the hearing to tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the attorney reported. It's a blatant attempt to rush the process before we can secure historical designation. And there's more. According to my source, Commissioner Blackwell has already privately assured Mitchell that the hearing will go in the development company's favor. They can't simply invalidate a legal purchase, can they? Olivia asked, alarm rising in her voice. They're claiming they discovered the auction notice wasn't properly posted in all required locations, making the entire process legally questionable, Maria explained. It's a technicality, but one that could potentially force a new auction, which Mitchell would ensure he wins. What can we do? I'm filing emergency motions, but we need to accelerate the historical designation process. Has Dr. Winters made any progress with the State Historic Preservation Office? Olivia glanced at Eleanor and Catherine, a new idea forming. I think we might have an even stronger case than before. Rebecca Harrington's descendants have come forward. As Olivia explained the family connection, Maria's tone shifted from concern to cautious optimism. A direct family connection to Rebecca Harrington, combined with the discovered artifacts and historical documentation, significantly strengthens our position. I'll contact Dr. Catherine Morris immediately for an expert statement supporting the historical designation. By nightfall, the situation had escalated into a full-blown race against time. Mitchell had arranged for landscaping equipment to be delivered to a staging area visible from Olivia's property. A clear intimidation tactic suggesting that development was imminent and inevitable. Meanwhile, Dr. Winters and Dr. Patel had mobilized colleagues from 3 universities and the State Medical Historical Society to prepare comprehensive documentation for the emergency historical designation application. Catherine Morris was working through the night, analyzing Rebecca's treatment protocols from a modern medical perspective to validate their scientific merit. As Olivia tucked her children into bed that night, Jackson asked the question that had been lingering unspoken. Mom, are we going to lose our house? Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. I don't know exactly what will happen tomorrow, sweetie, but I do know that we found something important that needs to be protected. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks, Lily said thoughtfully. Like Dr. Rebecca did. Dr. Patel said she helped people even when no one believed in her. Yes, exactly like that, Olivia replied, smoothing Lily's hair, and now it's our turn to be brave for her. After the children were asleep, Olivia sat on the porch swing, watching the distant lights of Mitchell's equipment on the property edge. The estate felt different now, no longer just a fixer-upper she'd impulsively purchased, but a place with profound meaning and purpose. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Catherine's medical analysis complete, compelling evidence that Rebecca's treatments were scientifically sound. Meeting with state preservation officials tonight. Hearing still on for 9 a.m. Be ready. And Olivia gazed out at the dark silhouettes of the grand oak trees that had witnessed Rebecca's secret work a century earlier. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but with it came a strange sense of clarity. Whatever happened at tomorrow's hearing, she knew she was now part of something much larger than herself, a continuing story of courage and scientific integrity that had begun with Rebecca Harrington nearly a century earlier. The estate had chosen her as surely as she had chosen it. As midnight approached, lights appeared on the gravel driveway. Catherine Morris had returned with Dr. Winters and Dr. Patel, bringing hope and perhaps the key to preserving Rebecca's legacy against the forces that sought to erase it once again. "We've made a breakthrough," Catherine announced, as Olivia welcomed them inside. Her eyes shone with excitement despite the late hour. "I've been analyzing Rebecca's formulations using modern immunological understanding. Her treatments weren't just folk remedies. They were sophisticated immunomodulators that addressed the exact mechanism that made the 1918 flu so deadly." Dr. Winters nodded enthusiastically. "Catherine has written a preliminary paper connecting Rebecca's work to contemporary pandemic response protocols. It demonstrates that she was decades ahead of her time in understanding cytokine modulation." "Will that help with the historical designation?" Olivia asked. "It elevates this from a local historical curiosity to a discovery of national medical significance," Dr. Patel explained. "The State Historic Preservation Officer has agreed to attend the hearing tomorrow to announce their preliminary finding of exceptional historical importance." As they finalized their strategy for the morning, Olivia felt a strange connection to Rebecca Harrington, another woman who had fought against powerful forces that tried to dismiss and diminish her. Rebecca had preserved her work, trusting that someday it would be discovered by someone who would recognize its value. Olivia was determined not to let her down. "There's something else you should know," Catherine said as they prepared to leave. "I've been in touch with the National Institutes of Health. Their historical division is extremely interested in Rebecca's work, particularly how her herbal formulations might inform modern antiviral research. They're prepared to provide substantial funding for preservation and further study." This news added another layer of support to their cause, but Olivia knew that tomorrow's hearing would still be an uphill battle against entrenched local interests and money. As she finally climbed the stairs to bed in the early morning hours, she paused at the portrait of Rebecca Harrington that now hung in the hallway, the serious young woman from the locket photograph whose determination had carried her through opposition and dismissal a century ago. "I'll do my best for you," Olivia whispered to the portrait. "I promise." The county hearing room buzzed with unusual activity for an early weekday morning. Local reporters sat in the back row, alerted by both Mitchell's press release about the Heritage Village and Dr. Winters' strategic calls, highlighting the historical discovery. County employees whispered among themselves, sensing the tension as Olivia entered with Maria Sanchez and Dr. Winters. James Mitchell sat confidently at the respondents' table, flanked by two corporate attorneys and architectural renderings of his planned development. He nodded curtly to Olivia, his expression suggesting the outcome was already determined. "Quite a turnout for a simple procedural review," Maria muttered, noting the packed room. "Mitchell's making this a public spectacle to increase pressure." Commissioner Blackwell called the hearing to order, his demeanor formal, but his eyes avoiding Olivia's. "We're here to address potential irregularities in the auction sale of the former Harrington property," he began. "Our review has identified several procedural concerns that may invalidate the auction results." Maria immediately rose. Before we proceed, we need to address a significant legal development. My client's property has been submitted for emergency consideration under the National Historic Preservation Act as a site of exceptional historical and scientific significance. That submission has no bearing on this proceeding, interjected Mitchell's attorney. Pending applications don't create any legal impediment to the county's review authority. Commissioner Blackwell nodded in agreement. While Ms. Chen is certainly entitled to seek historical designation, it doesn't impact our determination regarding the auction's validity. Maria remained standing. We also have evidence suggesting the alleged procedural errors were deliberately manufactured to benefit Heritage Village development. This accusation caused a stir in the room. Commissioner Blackwell banged his gavel. That's a serious allegation, Counselor, and not relevant to today's proceeding. Please be seated. For the next 20 minutes, the county attorney methodically outlined the claimed procedural errors, technicalities about posting requirements and publication deadlines. Each point seemed minor in isolation, but collectively created the impression of a flawed process. Given these irregularities, the county attorney concluded, we recommend the sale be invalidated and the property returned to auction with proper adherence to all procedural requirements. Mitchell's satisfied expression confirmed what everyone suspected. He had already arranged to be the successful bidder in any new auction. As Maria rose to present their response, the hearing room doors opened. Dr. Patel entered, accompanied by Catherine Morris and a distinguished woman in a formal suit carrying an official portfolio. Apologies for the interruption, Dr. Patel announced. I'm Dr. Maya Patel from State University Medical History Department. This is Dr. Catherine Morris, immunologist at Johns Hopkins and direct descendant of Rebecca Harrington and Director Sarah Jenkins from the State Historic Preservation Office. Commissioner Blackwell frowned at the disruption. This hearing is already in progress. Commissioner, Director Jenkins interjected firmly, approaching the bench. I need to inform you that as of 7:15 this morning, the Harrington estate has been granted emergency designation on the State Register of Historic Places with expedited consideration for the National Register. She placed official documents before the Commissioner. Furthermore, the site has received preliminary designation from the National Institutes of Health as a landmark in medical history based on the exceptional artifacts and documentation discovered on the property. A murmur swept through the room as reporters began taking notes more vigorously. Mitchell leaned forward, whispering urgently to his attorneys. While I appreciate this information, Commissioner Blackwell said stiffly, it doesn't directly impact the procedural review of the property sale. With respect, Commissioner, it absolutely does, Director Jenkins replied. State law explicitly prohibits any action that would jeopardize a designated historic site, including questioning established ownership without substantial cause. Catherine Morris stepped forward. As Rebecca Harrington's direct descendant, and a physician specializing in immunology, I can attest to the extraordinary significance of what Olivia Chen has discovered. This site represents a unique and irreplaceable piece of medical history that could inform contemporary pandemic response. Commissioner Blackwell looked increasingly uncomfortable as the dynamic in the room shifted. Perhaps we should recess briefly to review these new documents. If I may, Maria interjected. We have additional evidence directly relevant to the procedural concerns raised today. She distributed folders to the commissioners. These records obtained from the state archives conclusively show that the auction notice for the Harrington property was indeed posted in all required locations on the legally mandated schedule. How did you obtain these? The county attorney demanded. That's precisely our concern, Maria interrupted. The county records relating to this property were mysteriously unavailable immediately after my client raised questions about Mr. Mitchell's interest in the property. These archived copies demonstrate that the claimed procedural errors simply don't exist. As the commissioners reviewed the documents, Mitchell rose abruptly. "This is becoming a circus rather than a proper hearing. I move that we postpone until all these tangential matters can be sorted out." "What Mr. Mitchell means," Maria replied, coolly, "is that he'd prefer to delay until he can find another avenue to seize control of historically significant property for commercial development." Before Mitchell could respond, Catherine Morris spoke again. "There's something else the commissioners should know. My family has filed a formal ethics complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding the manipulation of this property's auction process." She held up a folder of her own. "We have documentation showing that the auction date was changed with minimal notice after my family expressed interest in purchasing our ancestral home, a change that coincidentally occurred immediately following a private meeting between Commissioner Blackwell and Mr. Mitchell." The room erupted in whispers as Commissioner Blackwell paled visibly. "These allegations are completely unfounded." "Commissioner," Director Jenkins cut in, "given the state designation and these new allegations, I strongly advise against any action invalidating Ms. Chen's purchase. Doing so could potentially violate multiple state preservation statutes and trigger a full investigation by our office and potentially the Attorney General." Mitchell and his attorneys huddled in urgent consultation while the commissioners whispered among themselves. The momentum had shifted dramatically, and everyone in the room could feel it. After several tense minutes, Commissioner Rodriguez, who had been notably silent until now, spoke up. "In light of these significant new developments, I move that we dismiss the procedural review and affirm the validity of the original auction sale. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that all required notifications were properly made." Despite Commissioner Blackwell's visible discomfort, the motion passed 3-2. Olivia's purchase of the Harrington estate would stand. As the hearing adjourned, James Mitchell approached Olivia, his earlier confidence replaced by barely contained frustration. "This isn't over, Ms. Chen. Historical designation or not, that property remains crucial to our development plans. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer, well above market value." "The estate isn't for sale, Mr. Mitchell," Olivia replied firmly. "It was entrusted to me, and I intend to honor that trust." "Everyone has a price," Mitchell insisted. "Name yours, 1.5 million. Think about what that would mean for your children's future." Olivia considered his words, genuinely tempted by the financial security such an amount would provide. But then she thought of Rebecca Harrington's courage and the legacy she had protected at great personal risk. "Some things aren't about price, Mr. Mitchell. They're about value, and those aren't the same thing." As Mitchell stalked away, Catherine Morris approached Olivia, extending her hand. "Thank you for protecting my great-grandmother's legacy. When we lost the estate after my uncle's death, I thought Rebecca's work might be lost forever. I feel like I was meant to find it," Olivia admitted, "but I'm not sure what happens next. Preserving everything properly will take resources I don't have." Director Jenkins joined them. "The state designation opens numerous funding opportunities for preservation and restoration, and given the exceptional nature of the discovery, several medical institutions have already expressed interest in supporting the project." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Dr. Patel and Catherine as they explained the historical significance of the Harrington estate discovery. The story of Rebecca Harrington, educated woman, brilliant physician, and medical pioneer, was emerging from the shadows of history, captivating public imagination. Olivia stood slightly apart from the crowd, watching as her private discovery became a public story. Jackson and Lily, who had been brought to the courthouse by Dr. Winters after the hearing concluded, joined her with wide eyes. "Does this mean we get to keep our house?" Lily asked hopefully. "Yes, sweetheart," Olivia replied, hugging her children close, "and it means we have an important job to do, helping people learn about Rebecca and the groundbreaking work she did." That afternoon, as they returned to the estate, Olivia found a small gathering waiting on her porch. Dr. Winters, Dr. Patel, Catherine Morris, and several other historians and preservation experts, all eager to begin the formal documentation process. "We've established a preliminary preservation plan," Dr. Winters explained as they walked toward the basement. "The first phase involves creating proper climate control for the hidden laboratory and professionally cataloging all artifacts." "What about the house itself?" Olivia asked. "I still have to make it livable for my family." "That's where the historical designation helps," Director Jenkins explained. "There are specific grants for homeowners of historic properties that would cover much of your renovation costs, provided the work preserves the historical character." As the experts discussed technical details, Catherine took Olivia aside. "When I was growing up, my grandmother used to tell me stories about Rebecca, how she was brilliant but had to hide her true work, how she risked everything to save lives. When the established medical community had failed, I became a physician largely because of those stories, but I never imagined finding actual proof of her methodologies." "It must be overwhelming to suddenly have your family history confirmed and made public," Olivia observed. Catherine nodded. "It is, but it's also incredibly validating. Rebecca's voice, which was silenced for so long, can finally be heard." As dusk fell, the visitors departed, leaving Olivia alone with her children in the suddenly quiet house. She stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the old oak trees with golden light, the same light that had fallen on those trees when Rebecca had risked everything to save lives during the darkest days of the pandemic. Olivia's phone chimed with a text from Maria. "Mitchell just withdrew all permit applications for the Heritage Village. Local paper wants to interview you tomorrow." The immediate threat had passed, but Olivia knew that preserving Rebecca's legacy would be a lifelong commitment. The house that had begun as an impulsive purchase, a place to raise her children, had become something far more significant. It was now a living historical site, a testament to one woman's courage, and a responsibility that would shape Olivia's life in ways she was only beginning to understand. That evening, as she tucked her children into bed, Jackson asked a question that caught her off guard. "Mom, do you think Rebecca would be happy we found her secret room?" Olivia paused, considering. "I think she would. She preserved everything so carefully, hoping someone would discover it when the time was right. I think she'd be proud that her story can finally be told. And we get to be part of her story now, right?" Lily added sleepily. "Yes, we do," Olivia replied softly. "We're a new chapter in a very old story." Later that night, Olivia sat alone at the kitchen table, reading through copies of Rebecca's journals by lamplight. The words, written more than a century earlier, resonated with passion, intelligence, and unwavering moral conviction. One passage in particular caught her attention. "I write, not knowing if these words will ever find their intended audience. I document truths that many wish to silence, but I persist in the faith that someday the world will be ready to hear what must be said, and someone will find what I have hidden and understand its worth." Olivia closed the journal, overwhelmed by the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place at this moment in history. She had come looking for a home for her children and found instead a mission, becoming the custodian of a legacy that had waited generations to be revealed. Through the window, she could see the grand oak trees marking the boundaries of the property, standing firm against the darkness. They had withstood nearly a century of weather and change, their silent witness to Rebecca's work continuing into a new era. Now, they would stand as sentinels to a new chapter in the estate's long history, one where secrets became stories, and a forgotten voice finally found its audience. What Olivia Chen couldn't know, as she prepared for bed in the house that had chosen her as surely as she had chosen it, was how profoundly the discovery in the basement would transform not just her life and her children's futures, but medical, historical understanding, and pandemic response research. The confrontation with Mitchell had been won, but the true work of honoring Rebecca Harrington's legacy was just beginning. 6 months after the courthouse confrontation, the Harrington estate had undergone a remarkable transformation. The weathered Victorian facade now stood proudly, with a fresh coat of historically accurate paint, its wraparound veranda meticulously restored to early 20th century specifications. The sagging roof had been replaced, the brick chimneys repointed, and the original windows carefully refurbished rather than replaced, all funded through historic preservation grants. But the most significant changes weren't visible from the outside. The basement laboratory had been professionally preserved, its precious contents catalogued and protected while remaining in their original location. A climate control system had been discreetly installed, ensuring the delicate papers and medical materials would survive for generations to come. Olivia stood on the veranda, watching as a small tour group followed Catherine Morris toward the newly constructed visitor center, Osasa's tasteful building, designed to complement the historic house while providing space for exhibits and educational programs about Rebecca's work and the 1918 pandemic. "It still feels surreal sometimes," Olivia said to Dr. Patel, who had joined her for the day's first tour. "6 months ago, I was just trying to create a home for my kids. Now we're running a medical historical site." Dr. Patel smiled, "And doing an extraordinary job of it. The Harrington Medical History Center is already being cited as a model for how to preserve historical sites while keeping them as living, functioning spaces." The designation of the Harrington Estate as a site on the National Register of Historic Places had opened doors that Olivia never could have imagined. The initial emergency grants for preservation had been followed by substantial funding from medical societies, educational foundations, and private donors. Captivated by Rebecca's story, Catherine Morris had leveraged her connections to secure a major grant from Johns Hopkins, specifically for creating educational programming around women's contributions to medical science. Most significantly, the Rebecca Harrington Foundation had been established with Olivia, Catherine, and Dr. Patel as founding board members. The foundation now owned the land and buildings with a permanent conservation easement, ensuring they could never be developed, while a special provision granted Olivia lifetime residency rights in the house itself. "Mom, the school bus is here," Lily called, racing around the corner of the house. At 10, she had embraced her role as the youngest unofficial tour guide, proudly showing visiting children the secret laboratory door that had changed their lives. Olivia watched as a yellow school bus rolled up the newly restored circular driveway. Today's visitors were 5th graders from an elementary school 40 miles away, part of the educational outreach program that brought students to learn about pandemic response and the power of perseverance in the face of institutional barriers. "Ready for another group?" Dr. Patel asked. "Always," Olivia replied. As a former librarian, she had found unexpected fulfillment in sharing Rebecca's story with young people. She had reduced her hours at the university library to part-time, allowing her to devote 3 days a week to the growing educational programs at what was now officially known as the Rebecca Harrington House and Medical History Center. As the children filed off the bus, Olivia greeted their teacher, a young woman who had specifically requested this field trip after reading about the discovery in a national education journal. "We've been studying epidemiology all semester," the teacher explained enthusiastically. "The children have so many questions about how Dr. Harrington developed treatments that worked when established methods failed." Olivia led the group toward the visitor center, where Catherine was waiting to begin their tour. The center's main room featured carefully designed exhibits explaining Rebecca's work, including reproductions of her journal entries, maps showing infection patterns during the pandemic, and interactive displays designed to help young visitors understand the scientific principles behind her treatments. "Before we go into the historic house and see the secret laboratory," Olivia began, addressing the wide-eyed students, "I want you to think about something important. Rebecca Harrington had to hide her work because in her time women weren't accepted as independent physicians, and treatments that came from herbal traditions were dismissed without testing. Sometimes being brave means trusting your own observations even when authorities tell you you're wrong." A small hand shot up immediately. "Did she ever get in trouble?" "That's a great question," Olivia replied. "According to her journals, she had several close calls. Once, a medical board investigator came to the house looking for whoever was practicing medicine without proper supervision. Another time, the local hospital director tried to discover the source of the treatments that were showing better results than the hospital's own protocols." As the tour progressed to the house, Olivia noticed a familiar car pulling into the parking area. James Mitchell emerged alone, without his usual corporate confidence. Since the courthouse confrontation, Mitchell had maintained a low profile locally, his Heritage Village plans significantly scaled back after the public relations disaster of attempting to demolish what had turned out to be a significant historical site. Olivia excused herself while Catherine continued the tour, walking over to meet Mitchell in the parking area. "Mr. Mitchell," she greeted him neutrally, "this is unexpected." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Chen, or should I say Director Chen now?" "Just, Olivia is fine. What brings you here?" Mitchell gazed past her at the restored house, and the children filing inside. "Curiosity, I suppose. I've been hearing about the transformation. The Chamber of Commerce can't stop talking about the tourism boost the center is providing." Olivia waited, sensing there was more to his visit. "My company has taken some significant hits since our disagreement," he continued. "The ethics investigation into Commissioner Blackwell has affected several of our projects throughout the county." "I'm sorry to hear that," Olivia replied diplomatically, though they both knew she wasn't. "In any case," Mitchell said, reaching into his jacket, "I came to deliver this personally." He handed her an envelope bearing the Heritage Village Development letterhead. "My board of directors has authorized a substantial donation to your foundation. Consider it a gesture of community goodwill." Olivia opened the envelope to find a check for $300,000 made out to the Rebecca Harrington Foundation. "That's unexpected," she managed, studying his face for any hidden agenda. "Business adaptation," he replied with a hint of his old confidence. "We've revised our development approach to emphasize medical heritage tourism. The success of your project has demonstrated there's profit in preservation when done correctly." Olivia suspected the gesture had more to do with rehabilitating his company's tarnished image than genuine conversion to preservation values, but the foundation could certainly use the funds to expand their educational programs. "The foundation appreciates your support," she said carefully. "I assume this comes without strings attached?" "Completely unrestricted," Mitchell confirmed, "though we wouldn't object to appropriate recognition in your donor materials." "We can certainly arrange that," Olivia agreed. As Mitchell turned to leave, she added, "Would you like a tour since you're here? The children would be fascinated to hear about how the property was almost developed instead of preserved." Mitchell actually smiled at that. Perhaps another time. Today is clearly devoted to education rather than cautionary tales about development overreach. After he departed, Olivia rejoined the school group, now gathered in front of the entrance to the hidden laboratory. As Catherine dramatically demonstrated how to open the concealed door, the children gasped with genuine wonder. "This is where Rebecca would work late at night," Catherine explained, leading them into the small room where the laboratory stood preserved behind protective glass barriers. She would create her medicines and document her results while the rest of the town slept. Then she would visit patients in their homes, bringing treatments when the hospitals had given up hope. A small girl raised her hand. Wasn't she scared of getting sick herself? Her journals tell us she was often frightened, Catherine acknowledged, but she wrote that her fear of doing nothing was greater than her fear of infection. She believed that knowledge could save lives, and saving lives was more important than recognition or safety. After the tour concluded and the children departed, Olivia sat with Catherine and Dr. Patel in what had once been the formal parlour, and now served as the Foundation's meeting room. "Mitchell made a donation," Olivia announced, showing them the check. "A rather substantial one." "Well, that's unexpected," Dr. Patel remarked, examining the check with raised eyebrows. "He mentioned something about his company pivoting toward medical heritage tourism," Olivia explained. "I suspect it's more about improving their public image after the ethics investigation made regional news." "Whatever his motivation, the funds will help expand the educational program," Catherine noted pragmatically. "We've had to turn away several school groups because we couldn't accommodate them." As they discussed plans for the donation, Olivia gazed out the window at the oak trees that had once provided shade for Rebecca as she tended her medicinal herb garden. Her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined when she impulsively bid on the rundown Victorian at the county auction, but there was no denying the sense of purpose she now felt. That evening, after the last visitors had departed and the children were doing homework in the private family rooms upstairs, Olivia made her way to the hidden laboratory alone. Though she now entered it almost daily as part of the educational tours she occasionally visited in these quiet moments, trying to connect with the woman who had worked so courageously in secret. She sat at Rebecca's desk, gently touching the worn wood where the physician had written her meticulous case notes. On the wall hung a portrait of Rebecca, a professional reproduction created from the tiny locket photograph that Jackson had found, now enhanced and enlarged. The serious young woman in early 20th century dress gazed directly at the viewer, her expression resolute and uncompromising. "I wonder what you'd think of all this," Olivia murmured to the portrait. "Your secret laboratory now welcomes dozens of visitors each day. Your methods, which you had to hide, are now being studied by medical researchers around the world." The transformation of the estate had been remarkable, but the transformation in Olivia's own life was perhaps even more profound. From a struggling single mother seeking an affordable home to the director of a nationally recognized historical site, she had found an unexpected calling as the steward of Rebecca's legacy. A knock on the open door interrupted her thoughts. Catherine stood in the doorway, a leather-bound volume in her hands. "I thought I might find you here," she said, entering the room. "I wanted to show you something we discovered while transcribing some of Rebecca's coded notes." She opened the volume to a marked page. This passage is from 1920, when she feared the medical establishment was closing in on her activities. Olivia read the carefully transcribed text. "I work in shadows now, uncertain if my research will ever reach those who could expand upon it. Yet I continue in the faith that someday, when medicine has advanced beyond its current prejudices, someone will discover this chamber and understand why I persisted despite all opposition." Perhaps then, when my methods can be evaluated without bias, these pages will speak for me." Olivia looked up, deeply moved by the words written more than a century earlier. "She was writing for us," she said quietly. "She knew someday someone would find this place." Catherine nodded. "She created this hidden laboratory, not just to conceal her work, but to preserve it for future generations. She was deliberately creating a time capsule in the hope that someday the world would be ready to hear her voice." As they closed up the historic site for the evening, Olivia stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the old house with golden light, the same light that had illuminated these walls when Rebecca worked in secret, risking everything for a future she would never see. Jackson and Lily joined her on the porch, their homework complete for the evening. "Can we have hot chocolate?" Jackson asked hopefully. "Of course," Olivia replied, putting an arm around each child as they went inside. To their private family kitchen, a modern space carefully hidden from the historical sections of the house. As she prepared their evening treat, Olivia reflected on how thoroughly her life had been transformed by the discovery in the basement. What had begun as a search for affordable housing had evolved into a mission that connected her to a courageous woman across the span of decades. The house that had once seemed like an impulsive gamble had become both a national treasure and the most meaningful home she could have provided for her children, a place where history lived and breathed, and where courage was not just taught but demonstrated. The Harrington estate had indeed been transformed, but its greatest achievement was perhaps the invisible one, connecting past to present, allowing a silenced voice to finally be heard, and demonstrating that doing what's right sometimes requires extraordinary courage, a lesson that would shape Jackson and Lily long after they outgrew their childhood home. "Mum, can I help give the tour to tomorrow's group?" Lily asked, warming her hands around her mug of hot chocolate. "Of course you can," Olivia replied. "Rebecca's story belongs to all of us now." 2 years to the day after Olivia Chen had first discovered the hidden laboratory, she stood at a podium erected on the estate lawn, addressing a crowd that filled the once overgrown gardens. Historians, medical researchers, educators, journalists, and visitors from across the country had gathered for the official dedication of the Rebecca Harrington Center for Medical History Research, a new facility constructed on the property with funding from the National Institutes of Health. "When I bought this house at a county auction, I was just looking for a home for my family," Olivia began, her voice carrying across the attentive audience. "I could never have imagined that removing old wallpaper and cleaning out a basement would lead us here to a discovery that would rewrite history and create a legacy that will endure for generations." Behind Olivia, the Victorian house stood, fully restored, its red brick gleaming in the spring sunshine. Adjacent to it, the new research centre, designed to complement the historic architecture while providing state-of-the-art facilities for scholars, was marked by a bronze plaque bearing Rebecca Harrington's words, "Let knowledge serve humanity, when pride and prejudice have fallen silent." In the front row sat Jackson and Lily, now 12 years old, beside Catherine Morris and Eleanor Winters in her wheelchair. The elderly woman, now 84, had lived to see her family's legacy fully recognized and celebrated. Beside them sat Dr. Patel and Dr. Winters, whose prompt recognition of the discovery's significance had been crucial in those first critical days. The Rebecca Harrington House has welcomed more than 75,000 visitors in the past 2 years, Olivia continued. School children, medical students, historians, and people from all walks of life have come to learn about one woman's extraordinary courage and her commitment to saving lives in a time of global crisis. What Olivia didn't mention was how thoroughly the discovery had transformed her own life. The former librarian was now the executive director of the Harrington Medical History Foundation, overseeing a staff of 15 and an annual budget that had grown to over $5 million. She had completed a master's degree in public history through an online program, finding unexpected fulfillment in her second career as the steward of Rebecca's legacy. Today, we dedicate this research center not only to Rebecca Harrington, but to all those whose contributions to medicine were erased or diminished because of gender, race, or unconventional approaches. The countless individuals who advanced human knowledge against tremendous odds, whose names may never be fully known, but whose courage changed the world. As Olivia concluded her remarks and the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, she caught sight of a familiar figure standing at the back of the crowd, James Mitchell. Their paths had crossed occasionally in the 2 years since the courthouse confrontation, their relationship evolving from antagonism to a wary mutual respect. Mitchell's company had indeed pivoted toward historical preservation, currently renovating several Victorian-era buildings in downtown Meridian Creek into a medical heritage district that emphasized the region's contributions to public health. The discovery at the Harrington estate had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. The successful preservation of the site had inspired renewed interest in medical history throughout the region. 3 other historic sites connected to public health initiatives had subsequently been identified and preserved. The County Historical Society, once operating on a shoestring budget with aging volunteers, now had paid staff and regular educational programs focused on the intersection of history and health. After the ceremony concluded and guests began touring the new research facility, a young woman approached Olivia. She introduced herself as Dr. Sophia Rodriguez, a pandemic research fellow at the CDC. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to thank you personally," she said earnestly. "My research team has been analyzing Rebecca Harrington's formulations for immunomodulating compounds. The natural substances she identified are showing remarkable promise in our contemporary antiviral research. We've actually synthesized several compounds based on her formulas that are entering preliminary trials." "I'm just the person who found the hidden door," Olivia replied modestly. "Rebecca did the hard part." "But you recognized the importance of what you found," Dr. Rodriguez insisted. "And you fought to preserve it when it would have been easier to take the developer's money and walk away. You've literally changed the trajectory of pandemic research." The young researcher's words reminded Olivia of those tense days when Mitchell had offered her millions for the property, a temptation that had been genuine and powerful. With 2 children to raise alone and limited financial resources, the offer had represented security and opportunity. Yet something about Rebecca's courage had made it impossible to surrender her legacy for personal gain. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned and staff began cleaning up, Catherine found Olivia sitting on the porch swing, taking a moment of quiet reflection. "Quite a journey from that first day when we examined the hidden laboratory," Catherine observed, joining her on the swing. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all happened," Olivia admitted. "Finding the chamber, the court battle, the preservation process. It feels like another lifetime." "You know," Catherine said thoughtfully, "I've been studying my ancestors' journals for 2 years now, and something struck me recently. Rebecca wrote often about believing her work would be discovered when the time was right, and by the person meant to find it." "She couldn't have known who would find it," Olivia pointed out. "No, but she believed in purpose, that nothing happens purely by chance," Catherine replied. "Think about it. Of all the people who might have purchased this house, it was bought by a research librarian with knowledge of historical documents and preservation, someone who immediately recognized the significance of what she found." Olivia had never considered this perspective. You think it was somehow meant to be? I think Rebecca would have thought so, Catherine smiled. In her last journal entry, she wrote something that's always stayed with me. I may not live to see my work vindicated, but I trust that my discoveries will find their way to those who will continue the research when the time is right. The thought was both humbling and profound. The idea that across more than a century, Rebecca had somehow entrusted her legacy to the future, to Olivia, who had indeed continued the work by ensuring her voice would finally be heard. As evening approached, the last visitors departed, leaving the historic site peaceful once more. Olivia walked through the familiar rooms of the house, now a museum on the main floor, but still her family's home in the private upstairs quarters. The dual purpose of the space had required creative solutions, but the foundation had been committed to maintaining the property as a living history site rather than a static museum. In the kitchen, once the heart of Rebecca's home-based medical practice and now restored to its early 20th century appearance, Lily was showing a visiting researcher's daughter how to use the hand-powered dough mixer that Rebecca had used while waiting for her medicines to steep. People had to work really hard just to make basic things, Lily explained with the confidence of a seasoned tour guide. Dr. Rebecca would mix her own bread while waiting for her herbal infusions to reach the right potency. Olivia paused in the doorway, struck by how naturally her daughter had absorbed the history of the place. Jackson and Lily had initially been upset about sharing their home with visitors and researchers, but they had gradually embraced their unique role as the youngest caretakers of Rebecca's legacy. They understood in their own way that they were part of something larger than themselves. That evening, after the celebration had ended and the family was alone in their private quarters, Olivia brought out a special surprise, a cake decorated with 2-year anniversary in blue icing. 2 years since we found the secret room, Jackson exclaimed, remembering the exact date without prompting. It feels like we've lived here forever, Lily added, claiming the slice with the most icing. As they enjoyed their small celebration, Olivia reflected on how completely the discovery had changed their lives. What had begun as a desperate gamble on an affordable home had evolved into a mission and purpose none of them could have imagined. The financial struggles that had once dominated her thoughts had been replaced by the challenges of managing a nationally recognized historical site. Challenges that were demanding but deeply fulfilling. "Mom," Lily said suddenly, "do you think there are other secret rooms in other houses that nobody has found yet?" "I'm sure there are," Olivia replied. "History is full of secrets waiting to be discovered." "Maybe I'll find one someday," Jackson mused. "Like you did." Olivia smiled at her son's comment, thinking about the unlikely chain of events that had led her to the hidden chamber. How many other historical treasures were waiting in attics, basements, and behind walls? Their significance, unknown to their current owners, how many other voices from the past were waiting to be heard? Later that night, after the children were asleep, Olivia sat at her desk, reviewing plans for the coming year's educational programs. The Harrington Medical History Foundation had recently received a major grant to develop curriculum materials about the 1918 pandemic, focusing on women's contributions to public health during the crisis. Schools across the country would soon be teaching Rebecca's story alongside those of more well-known historical figures. Through the window, Olivia could see the research center illuminated by security lights, its modern lines a striking contrast to the historic house. Inside those walls, scholars would pore over Rebecca's journals and formulations, extracting insights that would reshape medical understanding and pandemic response strategies. On her desk sat a framed photograph taken on the day they had discovered the hidden chamber, Olivia and the twins standing wide-eyed before the dust-covered laboratory, not yet understanding the significance of what they had found. Beside it stood a modern medical journal with an article titled Harrington's Forgotten Revolution, Rediscovering Early Immunomodulation Techniques, featuring Rebecca's work as analyzed by contemporary researchers. Olivia picked up one of Rebecca's journal reproductions, reading an entry from October 1918. Today, I treated 7 children whom the hospital had sent home to die. Their fevers broke within hours of receiving my formula. Yet when I attempted to share my observations with Dr. Reynolds at the hospital, he dismissed them without even examining my documentation. There comes a time when authority must bow to evidence, but that time seems not yet arrived. I will continue my work in the shadows until the light of understanding dawns. Rebecca's words, once dismissed and forgotten, now filled medical history textbooks and informed contemporary research. Her call for evidence-based approaches over dogma had transcended her time to speak to new generations. The woman who had worked in secrecy, risking everything for her principles, had finally found the audience she deserved. As Olivia prepared for bed, she paused at the window overlooking the estate grounds, where the oak trees stood as silent witnesses to history. Those same trees had shaded Rebecca as she gathered herbs for her remedies, had watched as she worked by lamplight documenting case studies, had endured as the house passed from owner to owner, and now stood as markers of a legacy preserved. The Harrington estate had been transformed from a neglected property facing development into a nationally recognized historical site and research center. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation had been in Olivia herself. From a single mother struggling to provide for her children to the steward of a legacy that would endure for generations. As she drifted off to sleep in the same house where Rebecca had once hidden her revolutionary work, Olivia felt a profound connection across time to a woman who had risked everything to save lives, trusting that someday someone would find her, hidden research, and ensure her voice would finally be heard. The legacy of the Harrington estate wasn't just in the preserved building or artifacts, but in the continuing impact of Rebecca's courage, inspiring new generations to recognize that standing for truth often requires extraordinary determination, and that one person's commitment to evidence-based approaches can echo across centuries, changing lives in ways they could never imagine. 5 years had passed since Olivia Chen first discovered the hidden laboratory beneath her Victorian house. What had begun as a local historical curiosity had evolved into an internationally recognized center for medical history research and pandemic response education. On this bright autumn morning, Olivia stood beside the governor as he cut the ribbon on the newest addition to the Harrington complex, a state-of-the-art public health education center designed to connect historical lessons with contemporary challenges. This education center represents our state's commitment to learning from our past to better prepare for our future, the governor announced to the assembled crowd. The Rebecca Harrington House has become a model for how historical discoveries can directly inform current scientific understanding and public health policy. As applause rippled through the audience, Olivia glanced at her children standing in the front row. Jackson and Lily, now 15, had grown up alongside the expanding historical site. What had once been an impulsive purchase at a county auction had become the defining element of their adolescence and had shaped their interests and ambitions in unexpected ways. The governor continued, "What makes this site truly exceptional is not just the remarkable preservation of Rebecca Harrington's laboratory and pandemic documentation, but the way her century-old insights continue to influence modern medical research. The antiviral compounds developed based on her formulations are now in advanced clinical trials, with promising results that may help us face future pandemics with greater resilience." After the ceremony concluded, Olivia led a private tour for the governor and key donors through the original house. The home's main floor remained meticulously preserved as a museum space, while the family continued to live in the private upstairs quarters. The dual purpose of the building had created logistical challenges over the years, but had ultimately enhanced the site's authenticity as a living history location. "The laboratory remains exactly where we found it," Olivia explained as they entered. The hidden chamber, now accessible through a carefully designed entryway that protected the artifacts while making them viewable to visitors. Our conservators determined that moving it would risk damage to both the equipment and the historical context. The hidden room that had once been filled with dust and silence now buzzed with carefully controlled lighting and humidity systems, preserving the fragile papers and equipment for future generations. Glass cases displayed selected journal entries, while interactive screens allowed visitors to explore digitized versions of Rebecca's case studies and formulations. "It's remarkable to think this remained hidden for over a century," the governor commented, examining the antique microscope. "How many other medical breakthroughs might still be waiting to be discovered in forgotten places?" "That's actually become something of a movement," Olivia replied. "Since our discovery was publicized, similar hidden caches have been found in at least 9 other historic homes connected to medical practitioners. Nothing quite as significant as Rebecca's laboratory, but each one adds to our understanding of medical history." Indeed, the Harrington effect, as historians had dubbed it, had inspired property owners across the country to examine their historic homes more carefully. Several minor but interesting discoveries had made national news, including a collection of Civil War-era surgical notes found behind a wall in Charleston and a cache of early X-ray equipment in a hidden attic compartment in Baltimore. As the VIP guests departed, Olivia found herself momentarily alone in the visitor center. The modern building, constructed 3 years after the initial discovery, now welcomed over 100,000 visitors annually. Interactive exhibits explained the 1918 pandemic, the barriers women physicians faced, and the scientific principles behind Rebecca's treatments. A wall of photographs documented the site's transformation from neglected Victorian to national landmark. Olivia paused before an image of herself and the twins standing on the porch the day after the courthouse confrontation. Exhausted but triumphant, having successfully defended their right to preserve Rebecca's legacy rather than surrender it to development. Quite a journey, isn't it? Catherine Morris appeared beside her, now a permanent fixture at the site as the Foundation's research director. Her academic career had shifted from Johns Hopkins to the local university medical school, where she had established a program in historical approaches to pandemic response. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all happened," Olivia admitted. "Remember when we thought success would be just preserving the laboratory and maybe getting a historical marker?" Catherine laughed. "And now we have a research center, education building, visitor center, publication series, and a waiting list of medical historians applying for fellowships." The Harrington Medical History Foundation now employed 32 full-time staff, including historians, medical researchers, educators, preservation specialists, and administrators. Its annual budget had grown to $4.6 million, funded through a combination of endowment income, grants, admission fees, and donations. The site had been featured in documentaries on major networks, and Finding Rebecca, the book Olivia and Catherine had co-authored about the discovery, had become required reading in many medical history courses. "The medical school buses are arriving," Catherine noted, glancing at her watch. "Today's the big day for Jackson, isn't it?" Olivia nodded proudly, his first presentation to medical students as an official junior docent. He's been practicing all week. They watched through the window as 2 buses unloaded first-year medical students from the state university. Jackson, now tall and confident, stepped forward to greet the first group, wearing the navy blazer that identified the site's educational staff. "Welcome to the Rebecca Harrington House and Medical History Center," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the lawn. "My name is Jackson, and I have a unique perspective on this historic site, because I was there when we discovered the hidden laboratory 5 years ago. In fact, I was the one who found the key that opened the secret compartment, containing Rebecca's clinical records." Olivia felt a surge of pride, watching her son engage so naturally with the visitors. Growing up alongside a developing historical site had shaped Jackson in profound ways. While most teenagers rebelled against their parents' interests, Jackson had embraced Rebecca's legacy, recently announcing his intention to study medicine with a focus on integrative approaches. Lily had been influenced differently by their unusual home life. Her bedroom wall featured botanical illustrations of the medicinal plants Rebecca had used, and she had developed a passionate interest in ethnobotany and traditional healing practices. Already she was taking college-level courses in plant biology through an online program, her sights set on a career bridging traditional knowledge with modern pharmaceutical research. As the day's tours proceeded, Olivia retreated to her office in the research center to focus on administrative work. The foundation's success had gradually transformed her role from hands-on educator to executive director, a transition that sometimes took her away from the aspects of the work she found most fulfilling. Today's tasks included reviewing grant applications for the coming year and finalizing the budget for a new digital archive project that would make Rebecca's complete journals accessible to researchers worldwide. A knock at her door interrupted her concentration. Dr. Winters, now retired but still actively involved with the foundation as a board member, entered with obvious excitement. "Olivia, you need to see this," he said, placing a file folder on her desk. "Catherine's team has been analyzing Rebecca's coded case notes from 1919, and they've made a remarkable discovery." Olivia opened the folder to find photocopies of journal pages with translation notes in the margins. "What am I looking at?" "Evidence that Rebecca wasn't working alone," Dr. Winters explained. "These entries document a network of at least 7 other women, nurses, midwives, and a pharmacist, who were secretly implementing her treatments across 3 counties. Women whose contributions to fighting the pandemic have been completely unknown until now." This revelation immediately captured Olivia's full attention. From the beginning, one of the most significant aspects of their discovery had been documenting women's leadership roles in medical innovation, challenging the historical narrative that had often relegated women to supporting positions rather than recognizing them as principal investigators. This could change our understanding of how alternative treatment networks operated during the pandemic, Olivia said, quickly grasping the implications. "If we can identify these women and research their backgrounds—" "Catherine is already on it," Dr. Winters confirmed. "She's assembled a research team to trace these individuals through census records and local histories. 2 of them appear to have been prominent in their communities, which makes their secret medical work even more remarkable." This discovery represented exactly why the preservation of the Harrington estate had been so important. Beyond the physical artifacts, Rebecca's documentation continued to yield new insights that transformed historical understanding of pandemic response and women's roles within medical innovation. Later that afternoon, as visitors departed and staff prepared to close the site for the day, Olivia found Jackson sitting on the house porch, his official tour duties complete. "How did it go?" Olivia asked, joining her son on the porch swing. That had become their favorite spot for conversations. "It was amazing," Jackson replied, his eyes bright with excitement. When I explained how Rebecca's formulations are influencing current antiviral research, the medical students had so many questions. One guy asked if studying her work had influenced my decision to pursue medicine. "And what did you say?" I told him the truth, that growing up surrounded by evidence of what one determined person can accomplish against all odds made me want to push boundaries too. That sometimes the most important medical insights come from looking at problems in unconventional ways. Olivia smiled, recognizing Rebecca's influence on her son's worldview. The parallels between their situations, separated by a century but connected by a common thread of determination and evidence-based thinking, had not been lost on the children as they grew up. That evening, after the staff had departed and the security systems were activated, the Chen family gathered in their private kitchen for dinner. This space, modern and functional while hidden from public view, represented the careful balance they maintained between living in a historical landmark and having a normal family life. "I heard about the new discovery," Lily said as they ate. "The network of women health practitioners. That's going to be a big deal, isn't it?" "Potentially groundbreaking," Olivia confirmed. "It suggests resistance to medical orthodoxy was more organized and woman-led than previously recognized." "Will you add new exhibits about them?" Jackson asked. "Eventually, once the research is more complete," Olivia explained. "That's how historical understanding evolves, layer by layer, as we uncover new evidence and make new connections." After dinner, Olivia retreated to the house porch with a cup of tea, enjoying a rare moment of solitude as the sun set over the property. The 5 years since discovering the hidden laboratory had passed in a blur of preservation work, fundraising, educational program development, and administrative challenges. The site had grown faster than anyone anticipated, bringing both opportunities and complications. From her vantage point, Olivia could see the entire complex, the historic Victorian at its center, surrounded by the carefully designed new buildings that supported its mission. The research center, with its distinctive copper roof, gleamed in the fading light. The education building, just opened that morning, stood ready to welcome tomorrow's visitors. And on the far side of the property, the foundation had recently purchased an additional 5 acres as a buffer against future development, ensuring Rebecca's legacy would remain in a setting that respected its historical context. Beyond the immediate property, the impact of their discovery had rippled outward in ways Olivia could never have predicted. The successful preservation battle had inspired similar efforts throughout the region. 4 nearby historic properties had been saved from development and repurposed as cultural sites. The county had revised its zoning regulations to provide stronger protections for historically significant properties. Even James Mitchell's company had eventually embraced historic preservation as a core business value, renovating several Victorian commercial buildings in downtown Meridian Creek rather than replacing them with modern structures. As darkness fell, Olivia made her way back inside, pausing as she always did beside the concealed door that led to Rebecca's secret laboratory. Though she had now entered that room thousands of times, she still felt a sense of wonder at the extraordinary chain of events that had brought her here. An impulsive bid at a county auction, a child's discovery of a tarnished locket, a moment of curiosity about an odd variation in the basement wall. Each seemingly small decision had led to this transformed reality, where a forgotten voice from the past had found its audience, and a struggling single mother had found her purpose. The Harrington estate expansion had physically manifested what Olivia had known intuitively from the beginning, that Rebecca's legacy deserved to be preserved, protected, and shared with the world. As she climbed the stairs to the family's private quarters, Olivia reflected that the most meaningful expansion wasn't in the buildings or programs, but in how Rebecca's story continued to grow and evolve, reaching new audiences and revealing new dimensions of courage in the face of institutional resistance. A legacy that expanded hearts and minds, challenging each visitor to consider what truths they might be willing to stand for, regardless of the cost. A decade had passed since Olivia Chen had first pressed against that oddly colored section of mortar in her basement, revealing the hidden laboratory that would change everything. On this warm summer evening, the grounds of the Rebecca Harrington National Historic Site were illuminated with elegant landscape lighting as hundreds of guests gathered for a special anniversary gala celebrating 10 years of preservation, education, and research. Under a tasteful pavilion erected on what had once been an overgrown garden, tables were arranged around a small stage. Photographs documenting the site's evolution lined the perimeter, from the dilapidated Victorian Olivia had impulsively purchased, at a county auction, to the internationally recognized complex it had become, now encompassing the original house, research center, education building, visitor center, and newly completed pandemic history museum. Olivia, now 46, stood at the podium wearing a formal gown that contrasted sharply with the work clothes she'd worn that first day while exploring the basement. As she gazed out at the assembled guests, historians, medical researchers, donors, politicians, and community members who had supported the Foundation's work, she felt a profound sense of how completely her life had been transformed by that single moment of discovery. 10 years ago today, my children and I found a hidden door in the basement of what was supposed to be just an affordable fixer-upper, she began, her voice steady with the confidence gained from years of public speaking. We had no idea that pushing on that door would open not just a hidden laboratory, but a hidden chapter of medical history, and completely redirect the course of our lives. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.